It is that time of the year, my friends. It is the spooky season, and today I thought why not have a classic vampire movie showdown, where I would be talking about Nosferatu, released in 1922, uh, Dracula, released in 1931, and the other Dracula, released in 1931. Okay, so of course, let's get started. I wonder who's doing that. Nosferatu, stop it. Anyways, let's talk about Nosferatu. Despite despite the name being Nosferatu, title being Nosferatu, Nosferatu actually just means vampire, and it's not the name of the vampire in that film. It's just that, well, that one episode of SpongeBob actually just made his name is Nosferatu for some reason. But yeah, in actuality, the name is Count Orlok. Nosferatu is actually kind of based off of Bram Stoker's Dracula book, and there are a good amount of similarities, especially in the beginning part, such as, and let me tell you, the main character, of course, Count Orlok is Count Dracula. Hutter is actually Jonathan Harker, and Hutter's wife Ellen, and is actually Mina Harker in this book. Main difference in the beginning, Jonathan and Mina weren't actually married; they're just engaged. But in the beginning of Nosferatu, they are married, and they actually and the book actually starts off with Harker's journey to Count Dracula's castle, while Nosferatu actually just starts off of talking about business and business and stuff like that, and then going into the castle. But the castle being like a prison break, as well as Count Dracula's or Count Orlok's journey to England are very, very similar. Seems very, very similar. Hank Harker in the book tries to escape him Dracula's castle and then ends up at the hospital. Well, in Nosferatu, Hutter tries to escape him Orlok's castle and somehow ends up at the hospital. Even the boat trip, and as I mentioned, both the counts' boat trips are so similar, as in the ship's crew just slowly dying one by one. There are a good amount of differences, but there are a good amount of similarities. Yes, and of course, no wonder Bram Stoker's widow actually sued the film. Of course, when I think of Nosferatu, I always think of Max Schreck as Count Orlok. The character design is so iconic. I always remember his pointy ears, his bald face, as well as his pointy fingers. It just creeps me out, except for some moments such as this one, which actually just looks hilarious. Apart from that, surprisingly, I actually kind of enjoy the stop motion in this film. Um, in a way, the stop motion does not feel smooth at all. And because of it feeling choppy, it makes me feel a little bit uneasy, and it really does enhance the movie just that more. And of course, F.W. Murnau's Nosferatu has one of the best endings I have ever seen in silent horror or cinema, even though this is the first silent horror film I have ever seen in my entire life. my, but apart from that, this Nosferatu is absolutely iconic. But another interesting thing is that you know what Nosferatu had that did not appear in the book? A plague. Yeah. So there's that. And plus, another interesting thing is Nosferatu actually started the trope with vampires actually burning to the sunlight. Yeah. Next up are the 1931 films of Dracula. These are the English and Spanish versions of the film. Of course, there are a few differences, and I will be talking about both of these movies at the same time because they use the same shooting script. And the Spanish version feels more complete. And to avoid further confusion, I will be using the English names of these characters. And if you want a note, Jonathan Harker's name in the Spanish version is actually Juan Harker, and Mina's name in the Spanish version is Eva, while Lucy's name in the Spanish version is Lucia. As I mentioned, I will be referring to the English names of all of these characters. Of course, when I was watching the 1901 Dracula movies and then decided I want to read this book, I thought they were going to be very similar. Surprisingly, I was as wrong as in the first page of the book. The films, both of the films start with Renfield's journey into Dracula's castle, but the book actually starts off with Jonathan Harker going into Dracula's castle, which was a very interesting difference. There are similarities, but oh my goodness, it's completely different, mainly because both the English version and the Spanish version actually adapted the play, which adapted the book, meaning to say it's more of an adaptation of the play. So that explains a good amount of things, because both of these versions actually do feel like a play. One of the most obvious ones I've seen has got to be when Renfield was actually describing one of Dracula's miracles, I want to say, where he describes how Dracula just made millions and millions of rats appear in front of his face. That would have looked interesting on screen. Maybe it's because of the technology at the time or something, but I would have loved to seen that visually. But of course, that's what we get. And if you really like versions of the plays, then both of these 1931 versions of the film are actually not a bad film to actually watch. The only problem is that there are some things that haven't aged well, and of course, both of these movies aren't scary by today's standards. But still, both of these movies have an iconic beginning. And although I really like the Spanish version more because they have more story elements into it. For instance, Lucy's storyline feels more resolved in the Spanish version rather than in the English version, which is why I kind of prefer the Spanish version. But the English version actually has Bela Lugosi as Dracula. I love Bela Lugosi as Dracula. I know Carlos something was actually trying when he portrayed the role of Dracula in the Spanish version, but yeah, George Melford's Dracula. Of course, George Melford directed the Spanish version and Todd Browning directed the English version. And the Spanish version is actually longer than the English version. And if I try to compare both of them, I always seem to find a benefit and a drawback for both of these versions. For one, the Spanish version feels more complete, but then Bela Lugosi's Dracula is more iconic. So it's kind of a very interesting choice. Of course, I would want to complete if I were to watch the whole thing as a complete package, I would recommend the Spanish version. And there are a good amount of choices in the Spanish version that are better than the English version, and there are some choices that the English version is better than the Spanish version. Spanish version's ending line, I like the Spanish version's ending line better than the English version. The Spanish version ending feels more complete, but then I prefer the English version's and climactic sequence, and it's mainly because in the Spanish version, you actually know that Mina is still alive, but then in the English version, you're not sure if Mina is still alive. So it really is kind of a very interesting thing. And of course, if you say this is very, very uncommon, actually no, this was actually a common thing they did back then in the early years of the talkies, I would assume. But at least both of these versions have a very iconic beginning, and the beginning sequence for both of these movies is very, very suspenseful. Although I don't think for modern viewers they are going to enjoy the whole movie, mainly because it's more or less like a play. Now, Now, in the book, on the other hand, the book is actually kind of a very exciting journey. I have been reading this book in preparation for the movie reviews, and because they're so different, and I realize I just wasted a good amount of time. But hey, I read through this entire thing, so there's that. The thing I liked about the book a bit more, or that I understand why they didn't put in the film, was probably in the probably about the Lucy storyline. The book has the Lucy storyline written down absolutely wonderfully. Yeah, and of course, there are some elements in the Lucy storyline that they kind of actually did put in both of the 1931 movies. He's he's kind of, to make it short, and it feels like they're trying to get the second half. And second of all, mainly because this is more because both the 1901 movies are done as are actually adaptations of the play. I do understand why the final act sequence does not take place near Count Dracula's castle in the snow, like in the book. So I guess that's it. And which movie do I think I prefer out of all of these three classic vampire movies? Well, I gotta say I love Nosferatu. The ending sequence of Nosferatu is just so iconic that I really, really just want to watch it again and again. And of course I do, and of course on second I would prefer the Spanish version and then the English version, mainly because the Spanish has a more complete, feels more complete than the English version does. And I guess that's all I have to say. So, guys, so I'm going to wish you all a happy Halloween and just make my escape. Goodbye.